on WNYC, live in the green space today, where you can watch us do the show if you want on live streaming video at WNYC.org or thegreenspace.org or the WNYC Facebook page. Now, an upcoming city council vote has residents of Harlem concerned about how a rezoning proposal might change the face of the neighborhood. Gothamist's Elizabeth Kim is reporting on that and joins me now. Hi, Liz. Thanks for coming down from the 8th floor to the 1st floor.
Thanks for having me.
You focus this primarily on Lenox Terrace. For people who don't know it, what is Lenox Terrace and what is some of its storied history?
So just to be clear, this particular rezoning would only affect Lenox Terrace, but it's a sprawling development. It basically goes from about 132nd Street to 135th Street, and it's also a storied complex in Harlem. It opened in the late 50s. It was billed as the first luxury apartment complex in Harlem. It had things like gold-braided doormen, these terraces where you had these sweeping views of New York City. There were porters. So there was a real sense that this was kind of a very unique place to be in Harlem, and it was exclusive.
But a lot of regular people live there, and some people who everybody would have heard of?
Right. So over the years, it started out with a lot of very well-heeled professionals. There were the elites from Harlem's political and creative classes. Charles Rangel lived there. He still lives there. Basil Patterson, his son, the former governor, David Patterson, still lives there. And over the years, then, it's a huge complex. There are roughly 4,000 residents, and it became this kind of motley assortment of interesting people from, the very wealthy to working class people.
Now, you call the proposed plan that requires the rezoning a massive infill project. Can you describe it?
So an infill project basically takes a piece of property, and it basically looks at where there is empty space. And because the way this was constructed, it was constructed at a time when apartment complexes, to be a luxury apartment complex, you had to have parking spaces. So there are a lot of parking spaces at this complex. There's a lot of green space at this parking complex. And also there are areas around the corners which are still undeveloped, and which they could insert these 5 28-story towers, which is what the owner is proposing.
5 28-story towers.
Yes.
And that's where the rezoning comes in. They're not allowed to do that as the zoning stands.
Right, and that's on top of the buildings that are already there. They have, I think it's 6 17-story buildings that are existing.
So who's concerned about this?
So the residents are very concerned about this because, one, the construction has been estimated to take as long as 7 years. I mean, it could very well take more. There's going to be a lot of excavation. And also the way the project is constructed, it's going to be mostly market rate housing. There will be some affordable units, but people often question how affordable are those units going to be. But it's definitely a project that's meant to generate revenue. And their concern is that it has been a mostly rent-stabilized complex, but over the years, a lot of the units, about a third of them, are now market rate. And now you're going to build more market rate units. So you're basically turning this, what has been a bastion of affordability, into a market rate complex that will most likely be less black, more white.
The numbers that I think I got right from your piece is 1,600 units, 400 of them below market rate or, quote, affordable. So 400 new affordable units, that's 400 new affordable units, but it's also 1,200 at market rate being added as a percentage to the neighborhood.
Right.
And since your headline is, in Harlem, a rezoning plan triggers fears about the end of a black oasis, is the oasis only Lenox Terrace, or are residents concerned about Harlem in a broader sense?
That's exactly the case. I mean, the more you think about it, it's very emblematic about what's been happening, not just to Harlem, but to a lot of other neighborhoods across the city with gentrification. But there's something about Harlem, because it has long been considered the Black capital of the world, in which I think there's a deeper sense of anxiety and angst over what this rezoning will do. They've seen the changes sweep across other sections. I mean, if you walk, it's within a few blocks of 125th Street, and you really see the dramatic changes that have gone along that commercial corridor. And to a lot of people, what this says is it looks less like Harlem. And more importantly, they're looking at the demographics. Will Harlem still be Black? Will Harlem still be a place for Black people? I interviewed one person who actually moved there recently, but he told me that he moved to Harlem because he wants to be in a place where people love Black people. And there is this growing fear that is Harlem going to change in a way in which it's no longer going to have this historic identity as a kind of an epicenter of Black culture?
Where's the mayor on this?
So it hasn't gotten to that point yet. It's still so early in the rezoning process. But, the tenants were really worried earlier in the year when they saw that the developer or the owner, the Olnick organization, had hired James Capolino because he's the city's top lobbyist and, has been well reported. He has close ties with Mayor de Blasio. So they're very nervous. The most decisive, I guess, vote would be that of the local city council member.
And that's usually the case.
Yeah.
Rezonings are up to the council member from
Right.
the area, basically, and the rest of council goes along. Who's the council member again?
Bill Perkins. So he hasn't said anything yet, and that also makes the residents extremely nervous.
So what's the news hook? There's a council hearing coming up or an actual vote?
There's going to be a vote by the local community board. Community Board 10, their land use committee, they held a hearing last month, and now they're expected to vote on it. So it's kind of just, it's going to grind its way through the process, which will take probably months.
Elizabeth Kim does great reporting on development and related issues for Gothamist, our Gothamist website, where she is a senior editor and reporter. Please thank Elizabeth Kim.
Thank you.